Welcome to the Cinematic Flashback Podcast. Get ready to hop into the Wayback Machine as we journey through the wild, bold, and unforgettable films of the 1970s. Each episode, we'll break down a classic movie or forgotten gem by exploring the who's who of each film, diving into the premise and plot, seeing how it performed then and now, and wrap things up with, did it groove through the decades or lose its beat? I am your host, Chuck Bryan. And joining me on this sweaty ride of a movie is my good friend and co-host, Matt Sargent. How are you doing, sir?
Hey, Chuck. How you doing? I'm well. And it's a sweaty and rainy film, for sure.
Oh, man. I tell you what, I have never felt like I needed to just wear a T-shirt and ball cap or something while watching a film. Boy, this film has atmosphere.
Yes, it certainly does, definitely.
So today we're covering William Friedkin's third film outing called Sorcerer. It is a movie about a gangster, a crooked banker, a hitman, and an Arab terrorist who are all stranded and on the run. They find themselves in the fictitious village of Porvenir. Their only chance of earning enough money so they can leave is to drive two trucks filled with unstable dynamite with leaking nitroglycerin up a long and rocky mountain road in order to plug an escalating oil refinery blaze with their deadly cargo likely to explode at the slightest bump. The four men must put aside their differences and work together to survive.
That's a great coverage. I don't think it covers the overwhelming despair of this fictitious town, and that it's populated to some extent with Nazis in hiding.
Yeah.
So clearly this town is meant to represent a backwater where expatriated people from whatever country are trying to hide from their country's law or from other organizations, as we find out from some of the characters.
I felt that we made a great choice of opening the cinematic flashback with The French Connection as our first episode. I feel like that was a film that both you and I liked, and it was a great representation of early 70s cinema.
Yeah, and it was a William Friedkin movie, which is amazing. This is commonly regarded as one of his best films, The Sorcerer, but not that many people saw it when it came out. It was not well marketed. There was some confusion because it was produced by two studios.
Yeah, there were two studios that had to kick. This film, its budget swelled up to like around $20 million, something like that.
Right.
And I believe it was Universal and Paramount. One of them had to reach out to the other to say, hey, we need you to help us cover the expenses of this film.
Yeah, it's funny that they put that much money into it. And then when it came to marketing it and trying to get the word out, neither studio really did it very much at all to get the word out.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, it kind of came out in movie theaters. And from what I read, it basically was in movie theaters for like 4 or 6 weeks, and then it was gone.
We did miss The Exorcist. Have you ever seen that one?
I have seen that, and I saw it. I have trivia about that as well. The famous stairway, obviously The Exorcist takes place in Georgetown. It's very close to where I grew up, and there's a famous stairway that plays a big part in the movie, and you actually could go visit that stairway.
I got to see The Exorcist on a re-release on the screen.
Oh, wow.
I can genuinely understand why it scared audiences. I mean, it was good, but I am just not sure that I'm ready yet to watch it again.
But yeah, William Friedkin, amazing. And this is a really remarkable film. And as we talk about it, I think you'll see where I'm coming from on this. It's amazing. The special effects of the time are crazy.
We can go ahead and check out the trailer, and then we can get into our opening thoughts about the film.
Great.
I actually went and I saw a movie last night. I call it the Tarantino. It's the Vista. He owns a couple of old theaters out here. Me and my friends just call it the Tarantino. You want to go to the Tarantino and go see whatever? So we went to go see Roy Scheider in Sorcerer, I believe was the name of it. I'd never heard of the movie, didn't even know the name of the movie or what it was about. My buddy's like, you got to see this, it's amazing. Is you go to that Tarantino theater and like he had 2 movie theater trailers, and you can tell I'm a sports fan. I'm butchering all of this. The first one was The French Connection. And the other one was Cruising with Al Pacino. And Both trailers were just incredible. So then you get into the movie. I was thinking maybe this was pre-Jaws. I have no idea. It was actually post-Jaws. It was 2 years after Jaws came out. And it looked like it must have been a brutal shoot in the rain, in the jungle. I don't know where they shot this thing. It's just it reminded me of The Dirty Dozen, Papillon, and Midnight Express all at the same time, like all into one movie. It was fantastic. And it's the thing that I love most about going to either one of Tarantino's theaters is every single time it's an amazing movie. Can you say that at AMC? No, you cannot. Can you say that at Lowe's? Can you say that at Showcase Cinema? I don't think you can.
I first heard about Sorcerer once again from the Cinema of the 70s group on Facebook. The poster, every now and then someone would post it. And the only thing that was on the poster was the scene from the rope bridge. It was a deuce and a half that is on this rope bridge that's perilously about to tip over. And in front of it, there's someone. You can tell it's pouring down rain. And it just has the name of the movie, Sorcerer. I'd never heard of it.
I had not heard of it either till you suggested we review it, and we did. And I'll be honest with you, when it was released, there was some complaint that the title was very misleading because there is no sorcerer in the film. Nobody is a sorcerer. Nobody has skills that make them a sorcerer. It's a reference to the inevitability of fate, and that's the sorcerer. I'll be honest with you, I was like movie watchers of the 70s sitting in the movie waiting for something to happen that had to do with the sorcerer.
But would you blame them? You just finished watching the Academy Award-winning Exorcist, which clearly was about an exorcism. So Sorcerer seems legitimate that it should be about a wizard or something.
Yeah, something supernatural, let's say. I will say the other sort of my general takeaway from it is there's very little humor in the movie.
I didn't laugh at all in this film.
I was a little confused watching it, and I did watch it in 2 parts, and it actually worked watching it in 2 parts because there's sort of a distinct spot where one part of the film is ending and the remainder of the film is starting up.
I found that this film was interesting because all of our main characters are essentially they're bad men, but all for different reasons. And they come from different parts of the world, and they all end up in this generic South American country called Porvenir, which seems like their own living purgatory. And the journey up the mountain with the dynamite is the penance that they must pay. And you're wondering throughout the film whether or not they'll make it to the end.
Sure. I think the other thing you're reminded of is Sisyphus, the Greek tragedy of the guy pushing the rock up the hill only for it to get to the very top and for it to roll all the way back down.
Roll right back down.
For him to start again. So there's very much that kind of feeling that they're working towards what they determine as salvation, but the hand of fate is always ready.
Okay, are we ready to get into production and trivia?
Sure. I think you have some good trivia on this. I know I have a couple of things that are funny, so we'll see what we got.
Goggles on, please.
Lights, camera, action!
Then remove your goggles.
Sorcerer was directed by William Friedkin, and he spent $22 million of 2 studios' money, both Paramount Pictures and Universal, as we said earlier. Do you want to take a guess at how much it made domestically?
I might have looked that up. I think it wasn't much. It was like 7 or 10 million.
$6 million.
Golly.
That is objectively the definition of a critical and commercial failure. And we need to let our listeners know how and why that happened, but I need to provide a little bit of 70s cinema context to accurately place Sorcerer in that history. And to do that, we need to take the Wayback Machine to the mid to late 60s, because prior to then, movies were still being made in that producer studio driven system that had existed since the golden age of Hollywood. But by the late 60s, the studio system was considered old Hollywood, and the new Hollywood was touting a group of directors who had rebelled against the studio system and nearly everything it had produced. In fact, Dennis Hopper allegedly told legendary old Hollywood director George Cukor, "We will bury you." The director of Easy Rider told the director of films such as My Fair Lady, A Star is Born, and Gaslight that they would bury old Hollywood. These were the anti-establishment directors who were inspired by the French New Wave They took full creative control and did practically whatever they wanted to do to tell their stories, and they found their audience who wanted to see their movies. And for a while, studios were making good money from the movies of directors such as Robert Altman, Hal Ashby, Sam Peckinpah, and pertinent to our movie today, William Friedkin. That's not the whole story, because around that same time, in the mid-60s, the first generation of directors who had studied film academically and formally trained in film schools were graduating and started to form companies that paved the way for independent filmmaking. Companies like American Zoetrope by Francis Ford Coppola, and extremely pertinent to our discussion today, Lucasfilm by George Lucas. These directors were known as the movie brats, and you know their names. It was Lucas, Coppola, Scorsese, De Palma, and the wonder kid himself, Steven Spielberg. It was Spielberg's Jaws in 1975 that ushered in the era of the blockbuster, which was further cemented on May 25th, 1977 with the release of Star Wars. The blockbuster meant big money for everyone involved, from the studios to distribution and everyone in between. The era of marketing, merchandising, and massive opening weekends had arrived. And that brings us to June 24th, 1977, the day that William Friedkin's next movie, the ambiguously named Sorcerer, opened, and it fell spectacularly on its face. It was a massive box office bomb and a major financial failure. Other remaining practicing anti-establishment directors had all faced similar failures, and these directors, rightly so, took the blame for these failures, signaling the demise of the director as king and returning movie making back to the producer and studio-driven models of old Hollywood. That is, until Lucasfilm took the merchandising money it made from Star Wars to help finance its sequel, paving the way for truly independent filmmaking. But that is a story for another time. And so here we are. There's no two ways around it. After The French Connection and The Exorcist, both Academy Award-winning films by Friedkin, his third film was dead on arrival. And it just might be the best film you never saw, because I know for me, it was.
That's amazing. I think it really captures what the situation was during the 70s and that whole ground shaking that was going on. For me, as a young person, and remember we've talked about this, in 1975, I was 14 years old. This was lost on me. It wasn't lost on me, though, like you, when I went in and to a movie theater and saw Star Wars for the first time. There was no denying that something new was happening.
Oh, yeah.
And it was, like you said, life-changing. And it was, we come to expect that. The idea that The Sorcerer came out and it really wasn't marketed well. Part of marketing is release timing. And I find it hard to believe that maybe they didn't realize what a juggernaut Star Wars was going to be, and that they needed to avoid it at all costs. Like, they might have been better off to hold it for a year.
Oh, I think if they held it, it would have been, but they had already spent $22 million.
Right, they're trying to get whatever they can back.
I think there's going to be parts where we'll say, okay, and just remember, it cost $1 million for them just to do this.
Right.
Because you can see how it ballooned up. But are we ready to talk about the actors?
Besides Roy Scheider, I hadn't really seen any of these actors.
Each of these characters are introduced in extended vignettes that precede the main story. One is an assassin, another is a terrorist, one is a corporate embezzler, and the last one is a New Jersey gang member. Francisco Rabal plays Nilo. He was the assassin that was introduced in the first vignette titled Vera Cruz. Of the four main characters, he's the only one that is not in South America hiding out, and he's the only one with one name. An actor named Amidou played Kasim, also known as Martinez. He was the terrorist that was introduced in the second vignette, Jerusalem. He is also something of an explosive expert, as the vignette depicts him escaping after detonating an explosive device. And that skill is going to be put to use later on. Bruno Cremer plays Victor Manzon. He was also known as Serrano in South America. He is the businessman who is introduced in the third vignette, Paris. When the bank calls its note, Manzon is unable to work out a deal or secure funding to cover it. He flees France, leaving behind his posh lifestyle and his wife after his partner commits suicide. Finally, we get to Roy Scheider. He plays Jackie Scanlon, or Dominguez as he's known in South America. He is the gangster that was introduced in the final and only non-subtitle vignette, Elizabeth, New Jersey. Scanlon is the wheelman for a crew sent to steal from a church bingo's money. In the process, one of the priests gets shot. While escaping the scene, the getaway car swerves to miss a truck, flipping it over and hitting a fire hydrant. Scanlon is the only member of the crew to survive. And the priest that was shot was related to the rival mafia family, who has now placed a hit out on Scanlon. And one of Scanlon's contacts provides him passage to a destination unknown. And those are the main characters of this film.
Manzon, the guy who kills himself, is actually his brother-in-law. And Manzon and his brother-in-law were trying to ask his father-in-law to bail him out. And that guy refuses. Obviously, there's a history of this type of thing going back, and I guess he's finally put his foot down.
No more.
Yeah, Manzon is really, in my opinion, as reprehensible as almost everyone. He's up there with me because he's just basically ups and leaves. His life wasn't really in danger. He was just in danger of maybe going into prison for debt or something like that, and ultimately being shamed. But instead of doing that, his brother-in-law feels like there's no escape, so he kills himself in the car outside of a cafe. That's pretty rough.
Ruining a perfectly good Porsche 911 in the process.
Exactly.
You know, I think of the four characters, I actually like Serrano the best.
I like Scanlon, and here's the reason for Scanlon. So Scanlon's with this gang. They think they're just hitting a normal bingo hall. It turns out they're hitting the bingo hall that the priest is connected with a made man. Everybody else in the car dies, and Scanlon's driving. So he's literally responsible for everybody in the car dying because he didn't pay attention. He was doing the one thing a wheelman's supposed to do, and that is drive the car.
Pay attention.
Yeah, there was some stuff going on inside the car, but the wheelman, it was 100% his fault that they didn't get away with it and that all those guys died.
This is the second time that we've had a car that crashed and ran into a fire hydrant. Do you remember what the first one was that we watched?
Was that in The French Connection?
No,
that was in Dirty
Harry.
Yeah. It's a great effect, right? And I'm sure directors love it because it really brings a sense of recent disaster, you know. But that was actually a great scene, that whole wreck. That was really well done, in my opinion. It's one of the really most realistic looking car crash rollovers and damage to the people. Because a lot of times you see in these movies, something like that happens and everybody's fine. They all climb out of the car. And that's not realistic. And I think they handle that really well. But honestly, it was 100% Scanlon's fault for this wreck.
A little story about this sequence. After having 11 unsuccessful takes, Friedkin just said that this sequence is seemingly impossible to shoot. But one of the line producers suggested that they employ a well-known specialist, Joey Chitwood. Chitwood meticulously analyzed the surroundings and ended up building a 40-foot long slanted ramp, which would allow him to drive the car at top speed on two wheels and flip it in midair and crash it into a fire hydrant. So it took them about 3 days to construct the ramp, and the stunt was successful during its very first take. So the 12th one was when they got another guy in to do the take.
Sometimes it takes hiring the right person. Yeah, I think my least favorite character is Kasim.
Kasim?
Yeah.
Yep.
Just because he's a terrorist and that.
Yeah.
Although, you know, in the story later on, his skills with explosives becomes useful. And then I thought the Nilo character's vignette was very odd. It was very, very short. It basically, he walks in, does his job, and then that's it. That's all you see. And then you don't see him till Port Veneer. It was really interesting to have the vignettes and a little bit confusing at first until you realize they all end up in this godforsaken, I think is a good description of this town.
Friedkin had final cut on the U.S. release, but not on foreign releases. So in the U.K., they recut it, and they interspersed these vignettes in the Port Veneer scene so that you kind of got a flashback.
That'd be interesting.
To how they got there.
That wouldn't not work.
It gets you into the action and then tells you a little bit. So that could have been a way to make it a little bit different.
Sure. Again, we referred to this before. The American audiences nowadays are just used to having things methodically spoon-fed to them. And I think William Friedkin, if we look at his films, he doesn't dumb down to his audience. So that might be why he insisted on, no, you're going to learn about this first, and then you're going to then we're going to go into that.
Do you know who was originally slated to play Dominguez or Scanlon?
No.
Friedkin wanted Steve McQueen to star in the film, and he actually accepted the part, but he had one condition. He wanted a co-starring role for his then wife, Ally McGraw.
Yeah, where would she fit?
She could have been the barfly lady.
No, that barfly needed to be ugly.
Yeah.
That was part of the story.
So when he wouldn't accept those conditions, McQueen dropped out of the film.
I didn't even know. That's funny. I will say, in this film, I was shocked to see how flat Roy Scheider's nose is in profile. I was like, oh my God, Did they put makeup on this guy? He looks like a prize fighter.
McQueen is known for not liking a lot of dialogue. The films he starred in are just, he's very minimal
Cool Hand Luke
on his dialogue. He liked to be cool. I think the low-key nature of Scanlon would have worked, but I just think Steve McQueen would have been too cool.
Yeah, I get that. I think he would have been good, but like when you reference those things, that might have been a bridge too far for him.
Other actors Friedkin had tried to get included Clint Eastwood, Jack Nicholson, Gene Hackman, and this was surprising to me, Chris Christopherson. But none of them wanted to travel at the time.
I could see a couple of those actors in that role and doing them pretty well. I don't know about Chris Christopherson. I think he's too pretty.
I think I could really see Hackman.
Yeah.
Jack Nicholson at this time is really before he was Jack Nicholson.
Yeah.
So you're getting 5 easy pieces Nicholson at this point.
Right, or One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest Nicholson.
Yeah.
He could have been good in this, definitely. I mean, Roy Scheider did a good job. So I remember him most from the Jaws movies, right? So seeing him in The French Connection and this one is really an eye-opener for me because I really had one-dimensional view of Roy Scheider.
Friedkin thought that the casting of Roy Scheider as the lead was his worst casting decision that he had ever made. Yeah, I disagree with that.
Yeah,
but
I'm not sure if that's the hill Friedkin wants to die on why this wasn't a success. He might be unhappy with his pick of Roy Scheider, but like I was saying, that wasn't the problem why this wasn't popular. Part of it was a timing thing. Part of it was a very poor name. Roy Scheider, he was a star, but he wasn't a mega star. So he wasn't going to draw a ton of people to the movie, in my opinion.
Are we ready to move on to what we liked about the film?
Sure.
I love the smell of napalm in the morning. Smells like victory.
Matt, so far we've been throwing out things that we like and things that we don't like. So what would you want to start off with?
I think for sure the car wreck scene with Scanlon was amazing. That took 20 takes, but it was, in my opinion, the most realistic I've seen in a long time. Of course, everybody's going to talk about the rope bridge scene and the special effects, which were very effective. We watched those scenes. There's a deuce and a half truck. It's going across what essentially is basically an expanded rope bridge over a raging river in a terrible rainstorm with rotted timbers. It's edge of your seat stuff. And when you're watching it, I'm just like, how in the world did they film this? Is ridiculous. I can't imagine how much it had to cost. To make something look bad means you really have to work hard at hiding these incredibly strong cables and stuff.
Just overall, the practical effects that you see on the screen are incredible. You mentioned the getaway car flipping, and then, of course, the highlight being that rope bridge scene. But also, I thought that the oil field exploding felt like it was real.
They have a great shot of it. They must have used a helicopter because obviously drones weren't a thing back then. They must have done it with live helicopters, which is extremely expensive.
Expensive and dangerous? Just ask John Landis from The Twilight Zone how dangerous helicopters and explosions can be.
Yeah.
You were wondering about how much the bridge scene cost. That was $1 million. And it included hydraulics. And it turned out that they had built this bridge over a significant river. And by the time they got it built and they were ready to film it, the river had dried up. So they took it all down. They went to a different location in another country, spent another $1 million rebuilding it, only to have the river dry up again. This is where William Friedkin got his nickname Hurricane Billy, because at this point, we're just going to put the water in there. We're just going to start having helicopters sending down water, the rain, the wind. We're just going to redo all of this. And they have the actors out there in those elements. The trucks were mounted onto the bridge so that they could do the swaying and everything. But they would fall into the water, and then they had to go back and retake it. But that scene, just the building of the bridge and then having to relocate it, that was $2 million of that $20 million.
At some point, while they're filming this movie, it's like, maybe you should take a hint from the movie and that fate is against you.
It reminded me of the final rope bridge scene in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, where there's one point where it's like, okay, these are miniatures now that you're seeing here. And, it's because we can't have real stunt people falling down. Bill Friedkin would have called nuts to that and had people falling.
Yes. Yeah, so I really like that. The other scene that I like was just the general scene in the bar of this horrible town.
Oh, yeah. With Serrano,
with all of them.
And
it's a variety of different scenes, but the whole scene inside of that bar, and then maybe this is maybe it's somewhat humorous. The only funny part of the whole movie probably is when they have to speak to the barkeeper in German. He's obviously a World War II Nazi hiding out. Yeah. So that was the only, I thought that was a little bit amusing.
We already talked about the atmosphere of this film in our opening, because you're going to feel yourself sweat just like the main characters. When they're on the road trip, they keep facing one obstacle after another. And every time you're bracing yourself, waiting for an explosion to happen.
They're hauling around dynamite that hasn't been stored correctly. Dynamite is just nitroglycerin that's been put into sort of a medium to keep it somewhat suspended inside the sticks, right? And if it's not taken care of, that nitroglycerin leaks out and can pool in these boxes. And nitroglycerin in its raw form is extremely, extremely explosive, and it's extremely non-stable. So a hard hit or a bump or anything along those lines could set it off. They've got 3 of these boxes in the back of those trucks. They're surrounded with sawdust, and they're bouncing around these roads and stuff. And you see at every bounce and every bump, they're seeing their lives flash before their eyes.
They have 2 trucks, and each truck has 3 boxes in it each, because at one point Scanlon says, hey, they don't expect both trucks to make it. And as they're traveling, they're keeping a significant distance between each truck. But apparently you can use a case of dynamite to blow out a oil well fire.
In my youth, everybody heard about Red Adair. Red Adair was this fellow that was a fireman, and he specialized in putting out oil rig fires. And they always had it on TV, and he almost always used some sort of explosive to create a vacuum that would put the flame out and stop it from perpetuating. This was a part of the movie that everybody would have been super familiar with and almost would have immediately known, well, there's the dynamite, there's the oil fire, and we know what we have to do. Whereas I think in some cases people were like, what are they going to do with the dynamite?
Apparently that was common knowledge.
Yeah. Do you have any more?
I have 2 more.
Okay.
The title of the film refers to the evil wizard of fate, and that no matter what you do or how much you try and control it, fate will always win out in the end. And so the themes of fate and desperation and the inescapability of doom was a stark contrast to the adventures of Luke Skywalker playing in the theater next door.
It almost seems like they're grasping at their last chance for redemption. It's dark all the way around.
The last item that I want to talk about is the group Tangerine Dream. They are a German electronic band who have been around since 1967. In addition to Sorcerer, they also provided the scores for films such as Thief, Legend, Risky Business, Firestarter, and Near Dark, which was a cool vampire movie starring the main cast of Aliens. They also composed nearly 35 hours of music for the video game Grand Theft Auto 5. Have you ever seen the show Stranger Things?
Yes.
The theme song for that was not written by Tangerine Dream, but it was inspired. So much so that Tangerine Dream recorded and released their own version of the Stranger Things theme song.
Huh. That's amazing. You definitely always take a great look at the film. I am more of the emotional interpreter of the music that's along with the film, and it definitely matched the tenor and what was being presented on the screen. Amazing job on that, I think.
That's all I had for things I liked about this film. Are we ready to get on to what maybe either we didn't like or maybe the audiences didn't like?
Yeah, sure.
What in the wide, wide world of sports is going on here?
So not trying to let the cat out of the bag, but I honestly really like this film. And personally, I feel this is the best of Friedkin's initial trio of films. I'm going to point out things that movie audiences of the time had to say about what they didn't like. And you've already mentioned one of them, which was the misleading title. So after The French Connection and The Exorcist, when Friedkin's next movie is called Sorcerer, what do you expect that movie is going to be about? At the least, it's going to be his take on supernatural stuff or a horror film, not this gritty existential thriller that it turned out to be.
Yeah, 100%.
I think you know that one.
Yeah, 100%. And here's the thing. I am absolutely with those people back in the 70s because I went into the movie thinking, well, I guess Roy Scheider is going to come out and be this amazing driver. He's going to be a sorcerer. He's going to be, it's just going to be astounding what he gets away with and what he does to save them or whatever. And that is not the case.
One of the other complaints that people had back in 1977 were the initial subtitles in the vignettes, because the first 3 vignettes are all subtitled. Now, Nilo's scene is over very quickly and it's very brief, but the other 2 have significant length. Due to the subtitles at the beginning of the film, many theater patrons were complaining, believing that they had unknowingly paid to see a foreign film. They felt like had been tricked. In order to alleviate that, special posters were quickly printed up and posted in the theater lobby, which stated the following: "Your attention, please. To dramatize the diverse backgrounds of the principal characters in Sorcerer, it's in a foreign language."
So there's another reason that cut from Europe probably would have been more effective, because
yes,
you would have already had part of the movie going on in English and then switched to those vignettes in the different languages. I'll be honest with you, I have enjoyed foreign films with subtitles almost my entire life. When you mentioned the subtitles, I had completely forgotten that they were done in subtitles. I'm not trying to brag here, but I watch a lot of foreign films, and reading subtitles in the foreign films I enjoy, because I love to hear the foreign language and then see what they're saying with the subtitles. So it's really second nature to me. But I can see that back in the 70s, that was not the norm. That was unusual for people, and it might be disconcerting.
I agree with you. I too, I love watching foreign films, and you have to hear it in the original language and read the subtitles. I'm used to that. As I get older, my hearing is not very good, and I find it very difficult to hear a lot of what's going on when I watch TV. So I always have my closed captioning running anyways. So to me, this wasn't a big deal. I don't think it would have been a big deal back then, but I can understand why, if you're sitting in a film. Okay, have you ever been in a foreign film or watched a foreign movie on TV where there's an extended sequence where there's no subtitles?
Yeah, a couple.
I one time watched Hidalgo, and it opens up and they're speaking in Cherokee. There's no subtitles. That's because I didn't turn on the closed captioning. But it's going on for a while. I'm expecting them to break into English or kind of do what they did with Hunt for Red October, where it starts off in Russian and then they kind of
British
universal
English.
Yeah, universal translator kicks in and Sean Connery is speaking British English. But no, I'm sitting here going, wow, this is a bold statement to not have any subtitles for us to know what's going on.
So by far and away, if we want to talk about subtitles for a moment, the best movie in the world to watch with subtitles on is Das Boot.
Oh, yeah.
I saw it in the movie
That's a great
theater
film.
in college because we had a snowstorm, and my then girlfriend, now wife, and I wanted to go do something, and so they showed Das Boot because it was it was a movie that was being shown to the film classes, and it's the only one they had on campus, and the regular film that was supposed to be delivered for us to watch couldn't be delivered because of the snow. So they said, we're going to show this film. And so everybody's in there, and it's a party mood and everything. And people aren't too serious in there. having a good time, maybe having a few beers and out in the snow, and then there's nothing to do. So the theater was packed. And that movie came on, and it was with subtitles in German. And man, about 10 minutes into that movie, you could hear a pin drop. People were just riveted. And it's a great movie. And in German, it's so much better because what the German language brings to how the scenes are played out. And I mean, it's a great movie, and I highly recommend it. There's English dubbed versions, and they're very good. But if you have the chance, watch that movie with subtitles. You'll really be happy.
Das Boot is a great example of that. I would say nearly any movie by Akira Kurosawa, if you love The Magnificent Seven, you have to see the original, The Seven Samurai. Mm-hmm. And you have to watch it with Japanese subtitles because the English is horrible.
Right. And I don't know, did you watch the Shogun miniseries?
Oh, yeah. That was like one of my favorite TV programs that I saw this year so far.
It's fantastic. And it's fantastic because you really get to hear the Japanese being spoken. You don't have to suffer through subtitles for the Portuguese. They speak Portuguese and English, but it's clearly not the language spoken by the Japanese characters. They speak Japanese. So that was a nice mix because that's what the characters could converse in. We got to hear it in English, but when the Japanese were speaking, it was in Japanese with subtitles.
Great TV show.
Yeah,
I think the other things, and we've already covered these, that audiences had issues with this film at the time was the lack of star power, the bleak and nihilistic tone, and of course, it was in the shadow of Star Wars. You know, we just can't overemphasize how much it completely overshadowed this film and probably many others in the month of June, and that contributed to its poor offering.
My guess is the entire summer, probably. It just ran roughshod over everything that might have come out. It might be a good place to look for unbid movies that were excellent.
I'm glad you said that because I was thinking of looking in June of 1977 to see what opened up after Star Wars and then take a look at that. So there might be some gems.
Go ahead.
I was going to say there might be some gems in there.
There might be some good gems for us. The other thing that's interesting is after Star Wars came out in the era of the blockbuster, you saw that sort of smaller films or specialty films, they just didn't come out when the blockbuster is going to come out. Or they tried to come out at the peak when people are still going to the theaters. There was a lot of different techniques they used. Sometimes they'd release at the same time because they knew people couldn't get into the theaters to see the blockbuster and they're looking for something else to watch, and they would go to that movie. So there was that's sort of the one technique. Let's ride the coattails. Let's be in the theater. This was at the advent of multiplexes. I mean, I think I saw Star Wars in a one-screen theater, but later we went to the mall, to the multiplex. And so if you couldn't, and of course it'd be showing in a couple of screens, but if you couldn't get in, maybe you were there, like, oh, we'll go see this.
Definitely remember seeing Star Wars. It was the Dutch Square Twin Theater, and it had two screens that were incredibly large by today's standards.
Yeah.
By the time we saw Empire Strikes Back, we saw it at the Columbia Mall, which had 4 screens.
Which was unheard of. 4 screens.
And they were small shoebox style theaters.
I saw one Star Wars at the mall at a multiplex, but it only had 3 or 4 screens. And then I saw one at the Annandale Theater, which was a single screen theater. And I saw the Deep there, and I saw one of the Star Wars there. And then we also had the Backlick Theater, a small single screen theater. My girlfriend in high school worked at the Ravensworth Theater near her home, and it had 2 screens. She had so many funny stories of working at the movie theater.
I have quite a few of them myself.
Yeah.
As we heard in my Midnight Movies, my college job was working at the Bush River Mall Cinema 8, which started its life as a 4-plex, but by the time I started working, it had been expanded to an 8-plex.
Very cool. Yeah, I never got to work in a movie theater, but she had a lot of funny stories.
Yeah, it was a good gig, and it worked out with my school.
Yeah, you have a lot of downtime, it seems like, while the movies are playing.
All right, are we ready to get on to our favorite scenes?
Easy, miss. I've got you.
You've got me? Who's got you?
As we have mentioned, there are some really great scenes in this film. For me, the rope bridge scene was one of the most nerve-wracking sequences I have ever watched. If you put aside how it was actually made, and you're just looking at it, There is no way that they're getting past this bridge. So to set it up, the trucks carrying the unstable nitroglycerin must cross a rotting, swaying bridge in a torrential downpour. And the realism and tension of the scene, crafted with practical special effects, make it legendary. It cost $2 million and it had to be built twice in 2 different locations.
There's a discussion about 2 different roads, 2 different routes that they can go. One's sort of the high road and one's the low road.
That's the wrong road. I think this road's better for us because it's higher.
You take this one.
No, you don't understand. This road is too low. It goes through the swamp. It's too much mud.
Can't you read a map? We have no information on that road.
You take that road.
We follow the map.
It's the wrong road. This is the wrong road. Where are you going? We're gonna cross that bridge. And you're gonna guide me. Because I can't do it alone.
Each truck takes a different route. You're with the first truck to cross the bridge, and as they cross the bridge, it's getting destroyed. It looks like they're going to tumble in or somebody's going to get lost, and you're at the edge of your seat. They get over the bridge. You're like, oh, gosh, that's great. I wonder what's happening with the other truck. I'm hoping they had a different bridge to go over, or it was easier. And no, the next thing you see is the second truck has to make it over the bridge that's recently been traversed by the first one and nearly destroyed.
That's the hand of the sorcerer. It didn't matter which path you took. They were fated to cross that bridge.
Right.
I think you were getting on to the second truck to cross was driven by Serrano. Out in front was Kasim telling him when to stop or which way to turn the wheel. We had already seen that happen between Nilo and Scheider in the first truck. So we're just absolutely sure there's no way the second truck can make it. Something.
Yeah.
But
that was a very stressful, thrilling, edge of your seat moment for sure. You notice in this scene that the rain is just pounding down. You can tell that the rain's being driven by either industrial fans or the helicopter parked above. It's torrential rain with hurricane level winds. And obviously he's not going to hear the guy yelling, stop, stop, stop. But luckily he does. And then they're able to get over the bridge.
But it then cuts to the next scene we wanted to talk about. Nilo and Dominguez had gotten stopped by this giant tree that has fallen across their path.
Galva. Excellent wood.
We're going to go around it. We can hack out 8 trees.
If you cut them down, how do you move them?
A winch.
How you gonna clear the stumps? How you gonna drive through a swamp?
We're going to go through it. Impossible. Impossible!
I think I can clear it.
I think Nilo is ready to give up. In fact, he pulls out his gun and shoots at the Dominguez character.
Yeah.
He's a marksman, so it's just past his ear. The other truck shows up as well. They're like, what are we going to do? At that point, the Roy Scheider Dominguez character is searching for an alternative around.
He's going to take the machete and cut these other trees so that he can cut a path literally through a swamp on either side.
And it's crazy because he's up to his waist in water. He's swinging that machete and going crazy and sort of saying they're going to do this. You know, it really reminded me of that scene from Star Trek where Khan says,
For hate's sake, I spit my last breath at thee.
And if you see how that ties in, because this is all the fates and inevitability and all of that kind of tied in together. So that was what I kind of got out of Roy Scheider doing that, was that he's been brought to the brink and he's just, what else are you going to throw at us?
When Serrano and Kasim show up, you don't see their truck at first. Kasim looks like he is just spent. He has nothing left. He's just shuffling in, and I'm like, oh man, did their truck blow up and they didn't die? So now all four of them are going to be riding together. But their truck was
they
behind
parked
them.
it far away for that reason, so that if theirs in the front blows up, they won't die. So.
But luckily, Kasim comes up with an idea for how to clear the tree.
You really get a feeling that Kasim's history with explosives plays a role. He does go through some period while we're watching of examining the tree, and it's massive. There's no hacking at this to get it out of the way.
Now, I like this plan. They're going to start with taking the dynamite out of the box that was being carried in, and they locate it on the tree, and then put together a Rube Goldberg style machine.
That Rube Goldberg machine is pretty funny. There's a scene where they take the pocket of, I think, Nilo's pocket, cut it off, and use that as...
He's got the biggest pockets.
It's an ingenious little triggering contraption to give him time to get away before the explosion happens.
It turned out in filming this, they could not blow this tree up, and tried a couple of times, and it just didn't work. This prompted Friedkin to reach out for the services of an arsonist hailing from Queens, New York, who went by the pseudonym Marvin the Torch. And he obliterated the tree in one take.
Getting the right person for the job.
I find that hard to believe that he was able to take dynamite on an airplane.
Well, they probably chartered a plane for him. That'd be the fastest way to get him there.
Are we ready to get into, did it groove through the decades or did it lose its beat?
I think we are.
Okay, you want to go first?
I think this movie came out at possibly the wrong time of year. It had a terrible name. So it's hard to compare what acclaim it might have gotten back in the day compared to what it has now. I think it didn't really groove in the old days, and I think watching it now, it's still a pretty great movie. One of the interesting things I saw sort of looking around the internet was a comedian, Bill Burr, went to one of the movie theaters that Quentin Tarantino owns, and he just refers to it as, let's go to the Tarantino. But it's a couple of movie theaters, I think, in Hollywood. He shows all sorts of old classic movies. He went to one of those theaters and saw this film, and he was like me. He'd never seen it before, hadn't really heard of it, and he just couldn't say enough good things about it, how great it was, the special effects and everything. I have to say, it would have been cool to see this movie in the movie theater like Bill Burr did. It didn't really groove in the old days, but it certainly holds its allure now. Not my most favorite movie in the world because it's a little dark and a little, nihilistic, but a great movie.
Well, I agree with you. I would love to see this film on the screen. In 1977, this film couldn't even dance the funky chicken or even imitate Travolta's pointing move, but something happened over the years. People started to give this ugly duckling a second look and discovered that this was unmistakably an incredibly good film. All credit goes to Hurricane Billy. He knew what he was doing and never compromised on what he knew this film could be. This film dances with the artistry of the kids who pulled out their cardboard and started spinning on their backs in the street, because this film wasn't meant for the disco floor of 1977. It was built for the raw, unrelenting rhythm of survival. This is Friedkin's best. Better than French Connection, better than The Exorcist. This is the one that Friedkin calls his favorite movies, and who am I to disagree with him? So if you have not watched this film, do so. It's on Apple TV, it's on Amazon, it's on Fandango. Just watch it.
That's a great summary and a great call to action for people to see this movie.
Thank you, Matt, for once again joining me. Join us again next time when we will actually talk about Michael Crichton's The First Great Train Robbery, as we had initially planned to do. And how about you? If you saw Sorcerer and you want to share with us your thoughts on the film, please do so by emailing us at podcast@cinematicflashback.com or leave a comment on our Facebook page, the Cinematic Flashback Podcast. You can also find us on X. Our handle is @Back270smovies. And please be sure to subscribe. The best way you can share this show is to recommend us to your friends. We deeply appreciate the feedback we've been receiving, so keep it coming. Also, we are continually trying to build this show, and we would deeply appreciate a review on the platform you are listening to. If you enjoyed the show, please consider giving us a 5-star review so we can reach more listeners. So join us next time as we take the Wayback Machine to the 70s to explore another film from that decade.
And it's crazy because he's up to his waist in water. He's just swinging this thing. And it's clear that he is,
he's lost
it. But what I got from that was almost like the scene from Star Wars with Khan, I strike at thee.
Oh, dude, you just lost so many credits.
Why?
Here. That was Star Trek.
Oh my gosh.
Star Wars.
Star Trek. I'm so sorry.
Sir.
I was trying to remember Khan's name so hard that I forgot about that. We'll re-record that. Come on, man. Give me a break.
This was the Donald Pleasance / Donald Sutherland moment for you. And I love it. This is going to be our pick 10. Okay, you want to try it again?
Yeah.